Hello and welcome to Warcraft Daily for today the 19th of February 2014. So in today's news we have quite a lot of interesting stuff actually. First of all, we'll have a bit of a talk about the upcoming Artcraft post, then some blue posts just on the forums, and then finally I'll round it off with some of the interesting tweets from over the weekend. But first of all, we have Artcraft. Now what is Artcraft? Well, the series of Blizzard blogs that they put up based on some of the art changes and decisions in Warlords of Draenor are being titled Artcraft, and we've only had one before, and that was the one that showed off a little bit of the human-female character model. This time, Chris Robertson, who is the lead art guy over at Blizzard, at least I think he's the lead guy, I don't know, he's one of the higher-ups anyway. Basically, he confirmed that we are going to be getting a new Artcraft post on Tuesday. It's going to cover garrisons, which should be quite cool because we haven't seen a great deal of garrison art bar what they showed at BlizzCon, and perhaps some of that BlizzCon stuff was only, like, placeholder, we're not particularly sure. Anyway, we're not going to see the full post until Tuesday, but until then, here is what he had to say. So first of all, the level of detail that they're aiming for in Warlords of Draenor is going to produce just basically some of the best sets, props, and buildings in World of Warcraft. I think that's, well, I mean, that's a given, it's in the newest expansion, but it's also very nice. From what I've seen of concept art, and then just the in-game stuff from BlizzCon, Draenor really does look nice. I'm particularly a fan of the way they've realized the Draenor architecture, and then a lot of the stuff in Frostfire Ridge. As for the garrisons themselves, the buildings do look very nice. I do like the human ones. I know there's still the Elwyn Forest kind of idea, but I think that works. They could have definitely gone another route though, and perhaps did it so it was more of a Draenor implementation of the Elwyn theme, so maybe it was a little bit more harsh and brutal, but perhaps they're going to roll in something like that in the future. Of course, we haven't actually seen the Orc version yet, so it'll definitely be nice to see that when they release on Tuesday. Anyway, he also said that creating one set of buildings per faction plus all the different upgrades is a massive workload, and it uses the same art resources as the new quest hubs, raids, and dungeons. He said that they will include elements of other races' themes in some of the buildings, however it's mainly just going to be the Druidar and Elwyn themes. This is essentially just to keep down the workflow, because art is a problem. I mean, it's not a problem, it's fantastic, but it can be problematic in terms of workflow. Art is very much dependent on quality, and a lot of people say to Blizzard, well, why don't you just hire more? Well, when it's the art team, they need to make sure that every hire is really, really well vetted, researched, and they're getting the right people in for the job. So it's not like they can just have this legion of artists. Another thing is that often in game design and just development in general, too many cooks ruins the broth. And I think art is definitely one of those things when just too many people can really have a detriment on it. But basically, if they were to add new buildings and sets of buildings for all the different factions, he basically said that would be at the expense of a raid tier in terms of the art team's workflow. And if you think about it, they would need to build and texture, well, they need to texture, 13, 15, 16 different buildings, 3 times for the 3 different upgrades for all the races in the game. That is an absurd amount of workflow. I mean, already we have, let's just say it's 15 buildings and garrisons. I'm not particularly sure exactly how many, but let's just say 15 buildings, or 10, whatever. Each of them has 3 upgrades, and then there's the 2 factions. That's like 60 to 90 different buildings they have to make. If you think of what's in Stormwind or what's in like a city, this is more, and these have to be of a higher fidelity as well. Plus, of course, it's just the way that they all kind of interweave together and those technical things. So yeah, there's a lot of work in garrisons, and making a unique one for every single race would be really cool, but for Warlords, maybe not that feasible. I can definitely say that personally I would prefer a raid tier as much as I would like a Draenor themed garrison. He did also say that there are no plans for adding new sets of buildings in patches throughout the expansion, but he did say that they are going to be changing and updating the garrison system as the expansion progresses. Just think of the way that they really update any feature as an expansion goes on. We'll probably see new missions, new followers, new rewards, that kind of thing. Perhaps even a new building or two if they can find ones that have decent amounts of gameplay value. So that should be nice. It's a feature that I would really like to see grow as the expansion goes on. I definitely think it would be a wasted opportunity if they were to just implement the garrison feature in 6.0 and then leave it. That would be quite the mistake. Then finally he said that if garrisons do become a long-term addition, then they could start thinking about adding in more building, more faction buildings and that kind of thing. But right now, they're basically just focusing on it being a Warlords of Draenor feature, and it's going to be our fortress against the Iron Horde. It is basically well, it's not the trial run, because in a way the farms in Mists of Pandaria were a trial run. But I think for a player housing kind of option, this is the trial run. If it really works out well here, they're going to find a way to fit it into other expansions. And if it does just become a thing that is like a raid, like a dungeon, like an arena, it's just a part of the game. If it does become that, then they definitely will update it with new art as time goes on. Next, we have some blue posts. These are quick enough, but basically, there was one, it's actually only one post, but I think it was Bashiok, and there was a new player that came into the game and said, basically, I'm really having a good time, but I think the character customization options were just a little bit boring, and there wasn't great variation in them. And I definitely agree with that new player. There is really not a great deal of variation when you compare World of Warcraft to some games. The guy specifically was talking about things like height, body size, stuff like that. And one valid point Bashiok actually pretty much agreed with is there would probably there'd be some issues with armor scaling, because if you think about it, each scaled version of armor is made for a specific race, and each race's body model is essentially the same. So perhaps if you were to start changing your body like size and stuff like that, it would just mess up armor. I'm not particularly sure. Anyway, so basically what Bashiok said, out of 3 different options, what would players prefer? And I'm going to throw this question to you guys. First of all, scars, tattoos, and war paint. The second option was more facial hair options for males, and the third one was racial variants for all of those who have them. So I think scars, tattoo, and war paint, that's pretty cool, actually. But I like war paint, as an example, war paint tattoos don't really fit every single race from a lore perspective, but still, it would be nice. Next was more facial hair options for males. Well, that would be cool, but if I had to choose between the 3, actually I'd rather have the racial variants. After all, it only affects male characters, and that's enough. There are upgrades that could affect every single character, not just ones of a single gender. So if they were going to make one change, I think it would be better just to do racial variants or scars, tattoos, and war paint. Ultimately, though, racial variants and then the whole sub-race system would be fantastic. Like if you could play as Dark Iron Dwarves, or, I don't know, different kinds of Night Elves, or Orcs, maybe you could be a Mag Horror Orc. Different things like that would be really nice. Hell, even different tribes of Tauren. It could look really cool, and it would add a lot more flavour to a character. Also from a role-playing perspective, for those who are interested in that, you could just make a Dark Iron Dwarf, and it would be a little bit easier to roleplay that because it would look like a Dark Iron Dwarf, and just some various things like that. Anyway, so let's move on to the final bit of today's news, which is tweets. The first one is from Celestian. He says that Hunter specs are too similar at the minute, and the dev team is taking some steps. Now, I know Hunters are definitely being subject to the ability snip, where they'll be taking away some of our buttons. Essentially, Blizzard say we're a little bit too bloated at the minute, which I mean, I can see that, but I do pretty much enjoy about, well, the 24 buttons that I use are all ones that I use regularly. But anyway, as for the idea of Hunter specs being too similar, I'm not particularly sure. As someone who's played a Hunter for a long time, every spec feels very different to me. I'm not so used to marksmanship, though. Still, more differentiation, or more differences between the different specs would be nice. I think really the main class that needs this, though, is Rogues, from what I can hear from Rogues that I've talked to, and then from Blizzard themselves. And I know that Rogues and Hunters are definitely 2 of the classes in which they're taking a lot of steps. I guess when you compare, say, a Hunter to the different specs of a Warlock, or the different specs of some other classes, they really are fundamentally extremely different in the other classes, whereas with Hunters, they're really just variations on the same thing. I think some of the level 100 talents could really help out with making classes feel different, though. Anyway, so the next thing Celestine said is that the item squish will not make old raids harder in terms of soloing, and they promise and 100% guarantee it. I know you probably all know this, but the reason why I say this is because you wouldn't believe the amount of questions that I still get on the Q&A for people who are not sure if the item squish will make old raids harder or not. No, it won't. They will be just as difficult or easy as they are now. So yeah, that's the thing. Next, we have some tweets from Chris Robertson, who is the guy who's doing Artcraft, but he also had 1 or 2 things other to say. First of all, he said that faction mount updates are on the radar, but there's no ETA at the minute. that does make sense actually, because some of these old faction mounts are the same age as the player models that are being replaced. They kind of look a little bit crappy in terms of polygon count and that kind of thing, so seeing an update would definitely be very nice. He also said that they have been looking at updating character backgrounds for quite a while. That's the sort of thing that you see in the login screen behind your character. Again, there isn't any ETA, but he did say that it's not planned to coincide with the model update of Warlords of Draenor. A little bit of a pity, and this is honestly something that should be upgraded. It's in the front end of the game, it's something that you see every time you log in, so it's definitely a change that everyone would see. Whether they care about it that much, probably not a giant amount, but it still would be nice. Anyway, so next we have 2 tweets from Holinka, and then that will be it for the day. First of all, he said that the focus of patch 6.0 is Ashram, but he had a few secrets to keep about the future. So what could these secrets be? Well, I'm guessing new arenas and battlegrounds. So yeah, I don't really know what I'd want out of a new arena or battleground. Arenas I can't really talk on, but as for battlegrounds, I kind of like the simple ones that are just one objective, and it's a map that's not full of gimmicks. They're the ones that I like because they're instantly readable to everyone who jumps into the match, and that just means that I think you're more guaranteed to have a decent chance of a nice flowing game. Like Warsong Gulch as an example. Most of the time when I go into that, our team does not get utterly dominated. Okay, we may lose, but there's still a decent back and forth battle there. And I think that just in some of the newer maps, it's like they want to put in vehicles and they want to put in things like that, and it doesn't often work. Now that said, of course, Silver Shard Mine and what do you call it? The other new one in Warlord, or not in Warlords, in Mists of Pandaria, like they were okay. I don't think they were particularly great. Especially the new one that came in patch 5.4. I don't know, or maybe it's 5.3, whatever. I don't know what it is about that thing, but I just don't like the flow of the matches there. I don't enjoy it. But anyway, the final thing that Holinka said is that he said, well, and I quote, "Man, what a difference." When he was talking about moving from 5.4 arenas to 6.0 arenas, they haven't actually announced what the specific changes are that he's talking about, but it definitely seems like it's maybe just a mixture of class balance and a few things like that that really do make arenas better. I guess right now, maybe some people think they're a bit stale or something like that. I'm not particularly sure, honestly. I'm not a big arena person. But hey, if he's the PvP guy and he thinks that they feel much better, then that's probably a good thing, I'd wager. Anyway, that is it for today's show. Thank you very much for watching. You can support the channel by liking, subscribing, and then checking out my Patreon page and the social media things. All those links are in the description. Anyway, that's it for the show. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.